Economic sanctions, one of the tools back on the agenda for many governments across the West. And as Russia invades Ukraine, it's found itself hit by a tsunami of sanctions, many of which have hit hard at the economic system that Russia relies on in order for its economy to function. So, what's the impact so far? What does the most recent data say about Russia's economy? Well, let's have a look. So, before we look at the most up-to-date data, at least at the time I'm writing this script, I think it's a good idea to just recap which sanctions are in force, focusing mainly on economic sanctions. First of all, banks have had their assets frozen. In the US, for example, the government has effectively disconnected Russia's largest financial institution, Sberbank, from the US financial system, greatly restricting Sberbank's access to transactions made in the US dollar, a really big hit for a bank that holds nearly 1/3 of all Russian banking sector's assets. As for VTB Bank, Russia's second largest bank, responsible for nearly 1/5 of the Russian banking sector's assets, it now has been completely blocked, with all assets touching the US financial system being frozen and US persons being prohibited with dealing with the bank. In fact, this is the same set of restrictions for these following Russian financial institutions. But it's not just banks. Many businesses and other entities are now subject to strict restrictions regarding new debt and equity. In the US alone, this means that businesses and entities that have an estimated $1.4 trillion in assets can no longer raise money through the US market, the world's most influential. And it doesn't stop there, because the sanctions are not only targeting Russian firms, but also Russian Federation financial institutions, such as the Russian Central Bank, which had its assets frozen across the US and most of Europe. This prevents the Russian Central Bank from accessing its $600 billion in assets that could be used to support the Russian ruble. These sanctions mentioned so far would be enough to throw Russia's economy into a deep recession, much deeper than the one it experienced in 2014. And it excludes the removal of key Russian banks from the SWIFT messaging system, which is no light action. SWIFT's system does not move money, but rather it allows banks to communicate with one another to allow a flow of money to pass through multiple banks if necessary to arrive at its correct destination. In short, without a communication system in place, moving money becomes a lot more difficult, and even more so internationally, where SWIFT's system is the standard. And it's worth pointing out that this particular sanction is not expected to come into force until the 12th of March. So, there you go. These are some of the key economic sanctions that Russia's economy has been exposed to. So, what has been the response? How is Russia's economy reacting? Now, to state the obvious, any answer about the impact of the economic sanctions imposed is incomplete, as there is insufficient data for anyone to give you a full answer. But, that said, the following data is what is currently available and helps us understand as of now what impact the announcement of sanctions and the sanctions themselves are having on Russia's economy. Let's start with the stock market, because the Moscow exchange has fallen more than a third since the invasion began, despite the fact that stock trading has actually been suspended for more than 5 sessions. The highly liquid Eck Russia ETF, which is traded in the USA, is down 78% year-to-date at the time of writing. Moving over to the Russian ruble, things don't get much better. The Russian currency was originally trading at 74 rubles to the US dollar at the beginning of 2022, and now, $1 is trading for 121 rubles. That's almost a 40% drop in the value of the Russian ruble, which will have a significant economic wave that will disrupt the Russian economy. All this has happened as the Russian central bank has raised rates from 9.5% to 20%. The move, which the institution says, is designed to offset the increased risk of ruble depreciation and inflation. As regards Russian bonds, I thought I'd bring in an expert, so I called a friend of mine, Niklas, a Swiss banker, and here's what he had to say about the movements in the bond market. Tell me a little bit then about how the bond market has been reacting and how you over in Switzerland have been dealing with the turbulence.
The first thing that happens in bond markets, and that's why they're quite interesting, is that they lose all of their liquidity. So it's completely different than the stock market, where you can basically sell still a decent amount of stocks. You can, worst case, just sell it down the stock exchange, right? You can't really do that with bonds because, first of all, they're not really traded on stock exchanges. And secondly, they're just too liquid to do that. So when that happens, bond prices just literally drop and you will have an incredibly tough time to start selling anything. For Russian bonds, it's much more difficult because, for example, sovereign debt, no one is really allowed to trade sovereign debt anymore. So we wouldn't be allowed to buy the Russian government bond because there's sanctions on it, and also because the bank doesn't want us to. For corporate bonds, for example, like Gazprom or something like Sberbank, you also can't trade because it's under sanctions. But Gazprom, for example, that theoretically still would work, although some settlement places, some clearing houses also closed that down. So you literally, even if you wanted to trade them, many people will have a very tough time actually trading them. That's quite similar to the stocks. Like the Moscow Stock Exchange has been closed for a while. You can still trade those stocks in London, but I just read today on Bloomberg that there's basically only one Russian ETF in Japan left, which is, not even actively traded or very liquid, but you could still trade that if you wanted to. Anything else is basically gone.
So for now, this is all the data that we have. We can only see what is happening on the ground in Russia and in the markets, as not all economic indicators are real time. Inflation data, PMIs, consumer and business confidence indexes, imports data, exports data, GDP figures, current account data, etc., etc. All of these data will come in over the coming months and will allow us to slowly put the pieces together as we understand just how badly the Russian economy will be impacted by the economic sanctions and ongoing war in Ukraine. Hi everyone, like the video and subscribe. Thanks for watching today's video. It's slightly different to normal, but I thought it was key to clarify what the data about Russia's economy is telling us so far, as finance is being used as a weapon. Comment below how much you think Russia's economy will contract this year, as at this point, it's anyone's guess. Otherwise, take care. Bye.